This video is sponsored by G2A. Use cashback code DORON for 3% off on Warcraft products. Hello guys, this is Doron's Movies, and today I will be talking about Northrend. Since we left, a lot of events occurred in the world of Azeroth, and much change was brought to the continent. So, without further ado, let's get into the lore. Wrath of the Lich King happened some 10 years ago, and it was a very serious campaign. Northrend is one of the most important continents, as many races descended from it, and a myriad of important events occurred there. However, everything changed after the Orcish invasions and when the Lich King took over. Ner'zhul defeated the Nerubians, which long reigned over Northrend, and the Scourge started growing more and more powerful. By the time Arthas took over and we arrived, the Scourge was the most dominant force on the continent. At the same time, it was really an all-out war. The Alliance and the Horde arrived in numbers, Arthas was keen on expanding, and there were a lot of experiments and storylines with the native races such as the Tonka, the Trolls, Rykel, and all others. Ultimately, Arthas was defeated, the Scourge was broken, so what really happened to the continent since we left to fight new foes? Well, most importantly, it is worth mentioning that the most dominant force is the Scourge. We know that Bolvar took over, and we have actually seen him being relevant very recently. The Lich King and the Ebonblade, the Death Knights that split from Arthas, rejoined and formed sort of an agreement to fight the Legion. Bolvar also decided to raise 4 new horsemen: Nazgrim, Thoras Trollbane, High Inquisitor Whitemane, and ultimately Tyrion. However, as they failed to resurrect Tyrion, Darien became the 4th horseman as he died in the attempt. Bolvar also tries to strengthen the Scourge and even raise new Frostworms. All of this is recent information, but most importantly, we know that the Scourge still exists, albeit it is only a shell of what it once was. Most of the strongest creations were destroyed and their numbers were completely decimated. However, they are still present and very dangerous. The situation with Bolvar is uncertain, as he is definitely not the noble paladin that he once was, as there might be some evil intentions. What we do know is that he will most likely keep growing in power and will play some role in the future. Now, one major change that occurred is that before Legion, Dalaran had left Northrend, and now not much is going around in the Crystal Song Forest. This is very important, as Dalaran was essentially the center of our activities, as well as trade and infrastructure. Of course, the Horde Alliance also left, and presumably only a small amount of forces remained in order to maintain the outposts, so we don't really have a strong presence as we once did, so ultimately Dalaran is not as important. However, it does change a lot, as after all, the floating city was the center of the continent. A lot is left unanswered, as in what we are doing in Northrend now, but there are speculations that the continent is useful in terms of resources, and most likely the Horde and the Alliance are actually utilizing the infrastructure that we once built for war in order to mine and to extract the natural wealth. Despite being half destroyed by the Scourge and all of the events that occurred, Northrend is no doubt a rich continent with a lot of unexplored potential, which could prove useful to both factions. Aside from natural resources, it is also entirely possible that there are many scholars, mages, and researchers that are populating Northrend in order to examine what was left over from the Blue Dragonflight, as well as all the ley lines and all the sources of magic of the continent. In terms of native races, well, using native very loosely, once the biggest power in Northrend, the Nerubians, were hit very hard by the Lich King. However, it was revealed that they had a giant secret stash of eggs hidden, and after the defeat of Arthas, they began to repopulate. It is entirely possible that within a certain amount of years, the Nerubians will begin to populate the continent and to build back their kingdom. Most likely never again at the same size as it once was, but they're definitely recovering. When it comes to the Vrykul, they're possibly one of the most important forces in Northrend right now. A lot of them joined the Lich King and were defeated and transformed into the undead and then defeated again, but regular Vrykul still remained and have most likely repopulated to some extent. Of course, not near their full power, but the combined clans have a lot of potential to cause some serious damage to other races and to all the surrounding settlements. In terms of the trolls that once ruled a massive part of Northrend and were extremely influential, they essentially fell apart. It is said that the Drakari trolls are no more, and the rest were scattered and joined us on the Lari. Zuldrak fell to the Scourge and currently is most likely just a ruin. The dragons that essentially originate from Northrend are still a force that within Dragonblight, but with the weakening of the dragon aspects, they're no longer that important. The Wyrmrest Temple played a part as recent as Legion, but it is just not as relevant. However, as Dalaran is no longer in Northrend, it is also entirely possible that the Wyrmrest Temple is the new center. Now, the Argent Crusade and all of the Paladins, after the war, mainly focused on the Plague Lands and restoring the former lands of Lordaeron, but it is also entirely possible that they remained in a certain number to help the continent and to control the Scourge from spreading too far out. Looking at the northern part, and arguably one of the most important parts of Northrend, there have been some developments with the Titan creations and Ulduar. The demons caused a few insurgencies there recently, but it is said that most of Ulduar was cleansed of the corruption, and the Earthen and the Mechanomes resumed the command of the facility under the eyes of the Keepers. Even today, Ulduar is still undergoing repairs, even though what happened was nearly 10 years ago. So ultimately, a lot of things happened in Northrend, most of the threats were defeated, but even today it is still a very dangerous place, partly due to the very harsh climate, and partly due to the native creatures as well as the remnants of the Scourge. It is highly speculated that we will return to Northrend at some point, and with the build-up with Bolvar, it is entirely possible that the Scourge will play some role again in the future. If that does happen though, we might see Northrend updated and all these changes implemented. Thank you for watching. Check out what happened to Outland by clicking on the screen, and also check out the second channel, Doran's Academy, for videos on real-world history and science. See you next time.